Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the seventh in our virtual webinar series, The Art and Science of Practical Management, Core Skills for Leadership and Management with College President, Professor Joe Martin. My name is Matthew Clark, and I am the Chair of the Trainee Advisory Committee of the Royal College of Pathologists, and it's my pleasure to be chairing tonight's session. Thank you very much to all of you who are our regular visitors, and anybody that's new, you are most welcome as well. Just to say that all the previous editions of this series are now up on the Royal College of Pathologists website. So if there are any that you want to see again or any that you've missed, please go and visit the website and have a look at the videos that are posted up there. You'll notice that all your microphones have been muted and your cameras have been switched off, and that's just to help the efficient running of this evening. And Joe is going to give us a 15 to 20-minute presentation, and then there'll be time for questions afterwards. And if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function that you can see at the bottom of your Zoom screen as well. And you can feel free to ask them during the presentation, or you can wait to the end. But Joe would love to hear from you and your thoughts about the talk as well. So without further ado, I will hand over to Joe, whose talk tonight is The Public Face of Leadership and Management, the Daily Mail Test. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I'm going to share some slides with you this evening. We're talking about leadership and management, particularly when you've got a profile, when you've got the press around, when you've got colleagues around who have contacts with journalists, or just social media presence. So we're talking about the Daily Mail test. We're talking about public scrutiny, formal and informal public scrutiny. So this is where people look at what you're doing, they examine what you're doing, and they will make a judgment. And they'll make a judgment whether you are essentially worthy or not, and they may comment publicly or in private to you. But we are largely in the health services, we are public servants. So formal public scrutiny comes in several forms, and it comes in the form of open meetings, publication of agendas and minutes. And this is very, very widespread in health services, but not very widespread in public companies or in limited companies, or virtually not open at all in private companies. Formal public scrutiny of trust boards, I've shared similar slides with you before. Every NHS trust is obliged to publish its upcoming public session board agendas and the papers that accompany those. They're published before the meeting. The public have the right to attend, but also journalists have the right to attend. And I'll come back to that in one of the lessons I personally learned. You can attend, so I would encourage you to do so. If you work in a trust, if you work in the UK, if you work in a public sector organisation, come and attend a trust board meeting and see what actually happens. You're also, as a board member, you will have questions from the public who attend. So if you want to question the work of a trust, go to the trust board meeting and ask a question. So it's a perfectly open and transparent way of doing business. The caveat on this is occasionally there will be a closed session at the boards which may have commercially sensitive or personal information, but the trust has to justify the fact that it is a closed session as opposed to an open session. And those are the only circumstances. Informal public scrutiny, you will see the whole time in the papers. You'll see reports of scandals, you'll see reports of pathologists, you'll see reports of top doctor in, you'll see rogue pathologist, rogue surgeon, rogue doctor. And these are the headlines that will come from, often actually from trust board papers where there may be reports of problems, or from legal action, and again where court action is open to the public. So informal public scrutiny is the stuff that will land on your doormat or on your tablet or on your laptop, your phone, in the form of headlines. The other ones are TV and radio, and you will see there's a lot of coverage constantly on the television of various items. Journalists phone up. So the one thing I hadn't really appreciated about being college president was the extent to which that journalists will try and access you for opinions about everything. And lots of members of the department have been approached. Lots of members of the Randox labs, all the Lighthouse labs have been approached by journalists also. So journalists make a living through making items for the news, and they're very good at it. And this is where the informal scrutiny over what we do and how we do it comes into play. Informal public scrutiny also takes the form of social media. I've used two examples here where people have used Twitter to comment on what is going on, and there is both a positive and a negative element to this public scrutiny as well. People will comment, and sometimes things will go very, very widely, and then they'll be picked up by the news. So the link between different news items and different news channels is not set. So Twitter will pick up on the BBC will pick up on newspaper articles, and similarly they'll pick up on Twitter items. If there's a big trending item, then often you'll find it subsequently in the papers or on the BBC. Not all scrutiny, not all commentary, bear in mind commentary and scrutiny are different. Not all commentary is bad, and you'll see some fabulous and nice complementary news stories. You'll see some good news on Twitter, on TV channels also. So the scrutiny, when we talk about leadership and management in the face of public scrutiny, not all of it is bad. And as professionals, we use that opportunity to promote our profession. So most of the media work I do is not being negative about things. It's being positive about the profession, and what a brilliant job we all do. And that's a very important balancing element to the public facing part of leadership. Yes, being unthinkingly supportive of things that you don't think is right is not tenable, but equally so balancing an overly critical or negative. We've talked about negativity, about the damaging effect of negativity, but balancing overly negative criticism with positive is quite valuable too. I said I would talk about personal learning, and I've done a range of different roles, but sat on a trust board. My first real appreciation of the impact of public scrutiny was at a trust board where I was acting chief medical officer for the Whole of Barts Health Trust. It was 5 hospitals and 53 community sites, and I was reviewing for the board. I was reviewing the quality and safety reports, including the mortality reports. And at one of our hospitals, it was higher than average. And I said, the death rates at this particular hospital are unacceptable. That evening, all across the Evening Standard was, medical director says death rates at X hospital are unacceptable, which is absolutely what I'd said. I'd also qualified it with what we were doing about it. But that particular use of the word unacceptable was picked up by the Evening Standard reporter who was in the room and who had a legitimate public interest to be in the room. But that was splashed across the Evening Standard. So that was a practical learning point for myself. Another one was as an expert witness. I don't do expert witness work anymore, but the one time I did accept expert witness work a while ago was in relation to an organ retention issue in Dublin. And I had dealt with all our organ retention issues at the Royal London Hospital and for the medical school, and been involved in dealing with families on that and the fallout of the organ retention issues at Alder Hey. So I turned up as an expert witness at the Dublin High Court and hadn't anticipated, which I should have done, there was intense media scrutiny of that particular court case, and I was chased down the road with cameras, with TV cameras. I felt like one of those people walking away from court where you've just been convicted of something horrid. But I was actually, so as a witness, you are also in the public eye as well. The other thing about TV and radio learning, if you do a television or a radio interview, what they don't tell you is you're told that you're doing it for, BBC Three Counties radio, and suddenly people phone you up and say, "Oh, I heard about you on Surrey radio or Suffolk radio." So a lot of media pieces that you do, particularly with the BBC, are essentially franchised around. So you think you're just doing it for a local radio station. In fact, you're not. You're doing national or sometimes international interviews. Now, you should always have media training before you do anything like that and know what points you want to make. But to be honest, it did come as a little surprise. And recently somebody said to me, "Oh, I saw you on the news." And it was an interview that I'd probably done 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago. And that particular clip was used in a different context. So the interviews that you give will be recorded, will be kept, and may be used again in a different context, often without your permission or without your specific permission. Nothing like informed consent in journalism, really, in that context. The other issue I've come across in terms of public scrutiny, so we've just been performing a clinical trial looking at community care home testing. The university and the company who are supplying the test kits issued a press release about the start of the trial. We're all terribly excited. We know that it's nice to bring rapid PCR testing to staff and patients in care homes. This was at an early stage of the pandemic where access to testing was not that easy. And suddenly I find that on Twitter, I am being followed by traders who are interested in the share price of the company. So people may be interested in what you say publicly for a range of different purposes. So if you're doing anything with a company or that may have commercial implications, do be aware that in a public-facing setting, that may be used in a commercial share price context. So those are 4 instances where my naivety has been bruised, and I have learnt, and I hope that you'll learn from that too. The other thing is, there are no secrets that time does not reveal. I am a great believer in trying to be as open as possible. Obviously, there's some confidential things that relate to individuals. I am not one for keeping secrets. I am not one for making things unnecessarily closet. Everything comes out. If you do something that is, that you're trying to hide, it will never be hidden. I think some public figures have learnt that. Mr. Clinton, lots of others have learnt that to their ultimate embarrassment. So if you work on the principle that transparency is a lot simpler in the long run, and that you try not to do anything that you would be ashamed of, that's probably, in terms of dealing with the public-facing aspect of management and leadership, that's probably the two pieces of advice that I would give you most strongly. And I'm going to leave you with that and say thank you.
Thanks very much, Jo, and thank you for sharing those personal experiences you've had throughout your career with the media. That's really interesting to hear, those varied responses. And interesting about these sort of last few comments you're making about honesty and sort of the trust aspect of it. But I suppose it's the balance as well, because with hearing those experiences you've had with the media, where suddenly you're thinking you're doing an interview for one thing, and then suddenly it's appearing all over the place as well. I suppose there's a distrust of that as well. And I suppose it must be difficult when you're approached by so many journalists to decide which one to, or does that play a part? How do you decide when to do an interview and when not to, and things?
That's actually quite. So take advice from colleagues. Okay. So if you're in a trust and you get asked to do a piece to media, tell your comms department. Yeah, it's usually the best thing to do, and they will give you advice. They're not in a place to stop you doing it, particularly if it's a sort of whistleblowing or a thing you feel passionate about. But trusts do have policies. There should never be gagging clauses preventing you from saying stuff. College won't have anything to do with that, and it's not. I don't think it's appropriate to stop people doing media, but it is helpful to advise them. And the comms departments are usually very helpful in that. Some of the media things are, why do I want to do this? And I've turned down a lot. I've turned down a lot of things because either it's been said multiple times before, or it isn't to the college advantage, or it isn't to the research advantage, or it isn't to the university, depending on what context you're coming from. And somebody is trying to undermine. They're trying to look for for you to say something that could be scandalized. Yes. And you need to work with reputable people. Yeah. And again, your comms departments are always very helpful in that setting. Thanks, Jo. So I'll open it up to questions from the audience now, and I think the first one from Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie. Links into a bit what you were just saying, Jo. So comments to journalists: is it correct to say that before you make any statement, it should always be run by your trust communications team first, regardless of your staffing position? And if it's a topic you'd rather not make any statement on, is it better to provide minimal information rather than a no comment? Again, you can say, I'm not the best. Rather than no comment. Sometimes it's, I'm not the best person to answer that question. Yeah. That's the slightly more helpful version of no comment. If you say no comment, they'd actually think you're hiding something. I suppose it makes them more inquisitive about it, I suppose, really. Yeah. I don't think I'm the best person to answer that. It's probably the easiest way. Yes, most trusts will have a communications policy, where they essentially request that you inform them when you're doing that, and it is polite, and it has been helpful. I know somebody, I've had a mentee who was being asked to be interviewed for various, asked advice about it. The first thing I said was, just tell your trust. you know, they won't stop you from doing it, but they will give you some advice, and you've got air cover as well. It's not good to embarrass your organisation with something that they don't know anything about.
Yeah.
If you've escalated it and escalated and escalated, that's absolutely fine. But if you've got a particular problem, sometimes your chief exec will be completely unsighted on it until they see it in the papers, and that's not necessarily a very fair way of dealing with them.
Yeah.
You know, ask to go and see them if it's really that burning, rather than sending the story to the Daily Mail.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you. We've got another question from Betsy. Thank you, Betsy. From what you have said, it feels easier to shrink away and avoid contact with the media, but this is clearly not an option. Do you have any positive experiences of engaging with the media, and what are the situations when you think it is worth doing so?
So all the stuff I've done, and I've done Sky News and BBC, particularly as president, it's something that the members expect you to send out the message about the college. So I think it's what do you want to achieve?
Yeah.
Do you want to highlight a particular concern? Do you want to, so I've talked about unregulated antibody testing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very important, you know, stuff was being sold on the internet, and it was not regulated tests. And that wasn't appropriate. So we needed to do something to highlight that for the public. So when you want to get a message across to the public, the news can be very, very helpful in that, and the news and journalism. So that's very positive. We've highlighted all sorts of things: fortification of flour, neural tube defects, workforce issues, and then more recently, you know, testing. Role of pathologists in testing. So all those issues, you can get a broader message out.
Yeah.
And that can be very positive.
And I suppose social media has made a big difference with that as well, Joe, now with the reach as well. And certainly we're both very active on social media with Twitter and things, and it's certainly, I found it very useful of reaching a wider audience as well. But
yeah, it certainly does. And you know, I think it is a two-way street. You know, some people will take every single opportunity to appear on the telly.
Yeah.
You know, some you know, particularly in the COVID times. But the college has a very positive message about the role of pathologists during the pandemic, and that's quite an important one to get out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't want them to forget us.
No. How do you separate your voice and your opinions from that of the organisation you represent? So
you can say I am speaking in a public capacity.
Okay. Yeah.
So I am moving on to a role with NHS England and Improvement from the 1st of November. And I gave evidence as president of the Royal College of Pathologists at a health select committee. Now, if a member of NHS England gives evidence at a health select committee, that's a different voice, that's a different setting. You're coming at it from it now. Probably I wouldn't come at it from any other point of view, but from NHS England's point of view, it's very clear, and you have to be very clear and say, speaking as president of the Royal College of Pathologists, or speaking as an individual, not for the college. You know, I think you have to make it very clear.
Be explicit about it. Yeah.
Absolutely explicit.
Thanks, Joe. This is quite an interesting question. I wanted to ask this as well. What media training have you had, and can you recommend a source of that training?
So I had some media training when I was on the board at Barts Health. I had some media training when I went to the college. And I'm about to have some media training for NHS England. I did suggest that I'd done it a bit, and could I get out of it? But no, they just want a bit more. basically it's a little bit like, it's not that different from expert witness training in a way.
Okay.
In that, you know, you have to make sure that you're trying to bring it back to the point that you want to make, and not saying, you know, if they and finding a polite way out of should they be sacked questions, which fortunately I haven't been asked too many of those. But that is, in terms of source, there's lots of places that do that. In fact, our college comms department could probably put you in touch with their recommended trainers if you wanted to.
I suppose it must be quite challenging actually when you're presented in it, when you're in a situation like that, with after having training as well. And do you find it puts pressure on you that you're constantly thinking about what, you know, you're saying? Do you find it inhibits what you're saying and you're sort of in an interview or something like that?
I think sometimes, and also you get more practiced at it. So, and you can ask other people to practice for you. There's some situations that, particularly at the beginning, I found it very hard talking to a black screen. So some of the BBC stuff now is all on Zoom, which is much nicer for you because you've got some sort of face really in the distance. Although there's sometimes a sound delay. So you're talking about, you hear sound delay. And so you've got this sort of really odd echo thing going on, which is very distracting. Sometimes it's just being able to think on your feet and not putting your foot in it, really. Learning more about the question. So practice, you know, how does this come across? If somebody says, oh, what do you think about so-and-so? And you go, ha. You know, I actually said in a Channel 4 Dispatches interview, luckily they didn't air it, they said, oh, what do you think about, you know, the advisors being paid £7,000 a day? And I went, oh yeah, I know some advisors charge like wounded buffalo. And I thought afterwards, I actually did that to camera. I can't believe I did that. Like, oh no. But luckily they didn't use that one, but it's, you know, it's in the archive somewhere. Yeah. So you can't be offhand, you can't be flippant, you can't, sarcasm doesn't work. So you're absolutely straight. I'm not entertaining on the news. I know I'm not entertaining. I'm not, you know, some of my colleagues are much more entertaining. But you know, I'll never make a TV presenter, but that's not my job, so it's fine.
We've had another question. What is the Daily Mail test that you mentioned in the title?
Oh yes, so the Daily Mail test is, would I be ashamed of this? That's, yeah, sorry, I didn't tie it back in the talk, but the Daily Mail test is, you know, if I'm deciding whether to take money from this drug company, or I'm deciding whether to alter this report so that nobody notices it, or actually am I going to hide the slides in a bucket or something, or, you know, fib about something, would I be ashamed? Would I want to see that as a headline in the Daily Mail? And generally, if you'd be ashamed to see it on a headline, then don't do it. Yeah. You know, if some, you know, I've seen colleagues caught out horribly with this, with, you know, going to a private practice session because they thought their list wasn't very busy and they could let their registrar do it. No. Yeah. Yes, no.
No, indeed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jo. Another question. How do you manage malicious scrutiny or unhealthy scrutiny?
It's really hard. It's really hard. Again, transparency, openness, data, come and see the... and it may not be malicious either. Sometimes it's just people who are distressed. So, yeah, people, it's very, luckily that's very rare. People digging for dirt is quite unusual. And invite them in, often, you know, show them stuff. Yes, they may come up with odds and ends, but apologise and put it right. That's all you can do, really. With the Alder Hey people, with the Alder Hey thing, a lot of families wanted to see the post-mortem reports, and I would always share. I would share those, and any notes, copies of any notes, completely open, you know, we will show you anything you want to see related to that particular issue. We will show it. We'll bring it to you.
I guess it comes down to a lot of what you've been saying over the few weeks about being honest and transparent about things. And I think it's like I've had several friends who are not in medicine, asking about the vaccine and questions like that about how it's made and concerns and things. And it's sometimes I suppose it all comes across quite aggressively, and we're very concerned. But when you actually sit down and just be honest and explain, and that it actually diffuses the whole situation. And I suppose that's a lesson for everything in leadership like that. Very similar, really. We've had another question. A nationally facing expert could have whatever they say or do scrutinized by the public or media. People could possibly get the wrong end of the stick and, for example, misdirect their anger. What helps you keep things in perspective to avoid worrying about or saying/doing anything at all?
So, I mean, I feel very sorry. So there's a very senior medical leader currently who has come in for all sorts of stick. And they're a genuine, nice human being trying to do their best in a difficult situation. And as a leader, generally, we're very lucky as pathologists in that most of our colleagues the massive majority of our colleagues are tolerant, understanding, and kind. Occasionally, you will get, I had somebody, not a pathologist, phone up and say, you need to justify yourself for saying what you did about antibody tests. Sorry, that's not quite sure where that came from, but so occasionally you will get grumpiness, but again, go back to the dealing with the unpleasant. It's not you, unless you've deliberately been horrid or thingy, or not truthful. But do your best. That's all you can do. If people find you lacking, which they will do, try better next time.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. We had another question from Angela Eason. Thanks both for a great talk. Not strictly related, but regards to court, do the college have any recommended training providers for giving evidence at inquests? Because I suppose inquests are the other one where, again, it's open to the public. Anybody can attend an inquest, including the media as well.
Yes, so the college does not recommend providers, but there are lots of, if you look up expert witness courses, there are many. With expert witness stuff, just be aware that there is guidance from the GMC around expert witness. Make sure you don't go beyond your expertise, and make sure that you know what you're doing before you go. I would strongly recommend a course before you go.
Brilliant, that's lovely. Thanks, Jo. I think we've actually we've answered all our questions for tonight, which is fantastic. So we'll draw a close to the session. Jo, thank you so much again for a fantastic talk, and thank you to all our delegates for some great questions again tonight. Another big thank you to the Royal College team for putting on these seminars every Wednesday. It's much appreciated, and the effort that goes into that. And we've got the last in our series next week, actually, and it will be Policy and Influence. How do I succeed in the things I want to do? So I would look forward to welcoming you next week and wish you all a good week in the meantime. So thank you very much.